everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us in this press conference under the title of Urgent Call for Unlocking Financial Resources for Women, CBD Women's Caucus Demands and Agreements, Rooted, Resumed COP16. As COP16.2 negotiations began in the plenary room, we bring with us the voices of women and girls worldwide, those who are hoping, calling, and demanding bold actions for gender justice in biodiversity policy. The CBD Women's Caucus is the official women's constituency within the Convention on Biological Diversity, continue to advocate for gender equality and the rights of women and girls in biodiversity decision-making at all levels. At this critical moment, as the negotiations on resource mobilization unfold, we emphasize the urgent need for a strong and gender-responsive decision without ambitious commitment to resource mobilization, achieving the goals of the global biodiversity framework remain out of reach. We call on parties to ensure a decision on resource mobilization here in Rome today. We call the party to ensure direct access to financial resources for women, particularly rural and indigenous women and women on the ground. The need for strong social safeguard in any kind of funding mechanism. Thank you so much to our speaker for being here. As we are moving for today's agenda for this press conference, I would like to welcome Edda Fernández, who is from AVAAZ. Thank you so much for joining us, and she is also active member in the CBD Women's Caucus. Thank you so much. I will give you the floor to talk about the resource mobilization and financial mechanism. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Fatima. Good morning to all of you here in the room, and good day for all the people that are joining this press conference through the UN web channel and around the world. The CBD Women's Caucus is bringing to Rome a strong and clear message regarding resource mobilization for biodiversity action and the elements on whatever financial mechanisms through which such resources should be deployed. We know these are critical issues and that getting the needed consensus to move forward demands not only strong commitments, but also political will. We are here to talk about the specifics on how this is to happen. What this means is that beyond the very relevant issue of increasing the funds, how these are to be used and by whom is of the utmost importance. As for yesterday morning, for example, the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund balance was a little over $330 million in pledges. Way too little if compared with the $700 billion that were considered back in 2022 to be needed to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. And it seems that we are stuck in the asking and not in the doing, and leaving out also critical aspects of what the CBD COP has decided as relevant considerations for the implementation of the GBF in particular. These include gender responsiveness and respects for the rights and roles of women, youth, indigenous peoples, and local communities. So we arrive in Rome championing these topics and also supportive of the consensus we have with the caucuses of indigenous peoples and local communities and the youth caucus regarding these aspects. We are calling the COP to include, for example, a specific mandate for the Global Environmental Facility, the GEF, to actually develop direct access modalities. As for now, the draft decision is a tepid call for the GEF to continue to investigate how this direct access could look like, and that is not enough. The women on the ground facing the early impacts of biodiversity loss, and at the same time, knowing how to face them, knowing how to halt this loss, how to reverse it, how to restore ecosystem, how to sustainably use biodiversity, how it is used in their everyday life as food, as medicines, as mental health, because being in contact with healthy ecosystems, and for the future of not only women, for the future of their families, of their communities, these important roles is being disregarded because there is no support for the implementation of their projects and strategies. So we are asking for that. I was talking about the GBF fund, for example. Almost all of the little money there is goes to intermediaries. Almost nothing really gets into the hands of women in communities, in indigenous communities. So their priorities designed by them are not getting funding. So this is not only unfair, but is contradictory to recognize to the fact that it's already recognized that the stewards on the land, on the ground, are women, are indigenous peoples, are youth, are the communities, and they are not getting the money. So whether it is a lot of money or little money, we need these financial architectures to change. We, as agreed by the COP back in 2023, the Targets 22 and Targets 23 of the GBS are the very important part of implementation, and they are barely addressed in the decisions of this COP. So we are making special considerations not to halting or to block any progress on what the COP is to decide now, but to make the necessary improvements to be sure that whatever is decided by the parties has this consideration.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Edda.
you. Thank you.
Any other point to raise before, because time is really running out?
Well, we are going to ask for a specific support for funding the implementation of the Gender Plan of Action. That is also a mandate of COP15, and it has been push away by the COP.
Thank you so much, Edda from Mexico, who shared about the resource mobilization, because the CBD Women's Caucus is bringing to room a strong and clear message regarding the resource mobilization for biodiversity action and elements, whatever financial mechanism through which such resources should be deployed. Now we are going to move not far away, but you mentioned, Edda, about the direct access to the resources. I would love to hear from Ana Di Pangracio from Argentina, who joined us from the FARN, and she is the member of the advisory board of the CBD Women's Caucus. And now we have heard about the urgent need for resource mobilization and financial mechanism. Can you please speak to why direct access to funding is essential, and what specific financial reforms are needed to ensure what women-led and community-driven initiatives receive the resources they require? From your perspectives and also from the perspectives of the CBD Women's Caucus position. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fatima, and good morning, everyone. Well, as CBD Women's Caucus, we have an urgent message in line with what my colleague was sharing, that the financial resources needed to implement the Global Biodiversity Framework to 2030 must be accessible, inclusive, and responsive to the realities of those working on the ground. The CBD Women's Caucus has been consistent in its demands, and today we reiterate them with even greater urgency. Direct access to funding is a long overdue commitment. Women, especially indigenous, rural, and local women, are at the forefront of biodiversity conservation, sustainable use, and restoration. Yet they continue to be sidelined in financial decision-making, often treated as beneficiaries rather than as key actors. The current financial mechanisms are complex, inaccessible, and dominated by large intermediaries that create unnecessary barriers. Therefore, we call on parties to mandate the Global Environment Facility, the CHEF, to develop direct access modalities, to study them, and then, of course, implement them. We already know that 20% of the GVFF is committed to IPLCs. This needs to be implemented with a gender approach, and towards CHEF 9, the ninth cycle, its CEO expressed last week that he plans to propose at least a 10% for CSOs, a dedicated percentage as well. And again, women's groups need to be included. And of course, why not a dedicated percentage strictly for women-led organizations? As well, dedicate financial resources for the implementation of the Gender Plan of Action and Target 23 of the GBF. These are not optional. They are existing commitments by parties that must be financed. Ensure women's participation in financial decision-making structures within the CHEF, the GBF fund, and the broader CBD processes. Representation must be substantive, not just symbolic. And we need flexible and inclusive financial processes for efficient biodiversity actions. Beyond access, we need adaptability. Funding frameworks must reflect the diverse knowledge systems and governance structures of indigenous peoples, local communities, and women-led organizations. This means simplifying application and reporting processes to match the realities of community-led conservation efforts, support alliances with partners trusted by women's and IPLC groups, ensuring social and environmental safeguards to prevent financial mechanisms from harming the very communities they claim to support, and achieving a balance between market-based and not market-based solutions to avoid perpetuating financial dependencies that do not serve biodiversity in the long term. So to go forwards to action, at COP15, parties committed to a human rights-based approach in implementing the GBF. And of course, that was the result of a huge coordinated campaign by civil society represented at the CBD process. That commitment must now be reflected in every single financial decision made at COP16. Biodiversity finance cannot remain trapped in studies, intermediaries, and bureaucratic delays while ecosystems collapse and communities fight for survival. The decisions taken in Rome will define whether biodiversity finance becomes a tool for transformation or yet another mechanism that excludes those who need it most. We demand action and accountability, and we will continue to push until women who are already leading biodiversity solutions receive the support that they deserve. It is their right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing these examples and for sharing our position regarding the direct access to the financial resources and how it is very critical and important to bring the money to the directly to the group like women, youth, and indigenous people or local communities. Thank you so much, Anna. And as we are moving forward with our press conference, we have Cristina Eghenter, who is going to talk about the position of the CBD Women's Caucus in terms of monitoring and reporting and review. Please, Cristina from WWF, please.
And Women Caucus.
And yes, policy lead for the CBD Women's Caucus.
Thank you, Fatima, and good morning, buongiorno to everybody. So we need resources. We need to make sure resources go to the ground, but we also need, for a successful implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, systems in place for reporting and monitoring and global review of progress that are effective and inclusive in the spirit of whole of society and whole of government. Regarding monitoring decision, the Women Caucus position is for the draft decision to be adopted as is. There are a couple of brackets to be resolved. Yes, we know we don't have a headline indicator for Target 23, which it's always been and continues to be our main ask, but there is a robust process in place in the decision to allow for the development of other headline indicators and other indicators. We have a component indicator adopted for the implementation of the Gender Plan of Action. And so with the perspective to look at implementation, we really urge parties to adopt gender-responsive indicators. So there is a lot they can do at national level as part of their MBSAPs and also of their 7th national reports, which are due early next year. Binary indicators are good, important, but not enough to measure progress on gender equality and women's rights. The other point, very important, we think, is about collecting and disaggregated data by sex, gender, age, indigenous status, and others. This is really the way to measure, one of the ways to measure that the human rights-based implementation of and gender-responsive implementation of the GBF. For the decision on reporting and global review is a clean text. So we go with that text as a position. But yes, the language could be stronger about participation of women, including in regional dialogues, and also recognizing their contribution to the achievement of the goals and targets of the GBF. We need to ensure that the process is gender responsive, inclusive, and effective. Again, the spirit of the whole of society, that's what it means. We have a main point that we'd like to get across, which is about the global review of progress. There is also next year a midterm review of the implementation of the Gender Plan of Action, Decision 15/11, correct? And so we want to make sure that the result of that global midterm review informs and is accounted for in the global review of progress. I think this is very important. And this is in line with another decision, 15/6, about applying a gender plan of action and gender responsive aspect in all aspects of the implementation, monitoring, and review. And with this, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cristina, for sharing these demands. Now we are moving forward to talk about the link between the biodiversity, finance, and human rights, as the human rights, it's in the core of our demands as well, because we can't implement the GBF without including the human rights-based approach. We have with us Nella Carnota from the UN High Commission for the Human Rights, and also a part of the CBD Women's Caucus. Oh, okay, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to the CBD Women's Caucus for having me. So I will talk very briefly about the link between biodiversity, finance, and human rights. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework reflects the reality of the mutual interdependence between human rights, gender equality, and healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. It sets out that the framework's implementation should follow a human rights-based approach, respecting, protecting, promoting, and fulfilling human rights. And it also highlights that the successful implementation of the framework will depend on gender equality and empowerment of women and girls and on reducing inequalities. And this applies to biodiversity finance as well, of course, just as much as any other aspect of the GBF, and it implies that all biodiversity-related financial flows should be aligned with human rights, including gender equality. It means, among others, that financial measures to address biodiversity loss should not cause adverse human rights impacts, including disproportionate impacts on women and girls, indigenous peoples, youth, local communities, and people in vulnerable situations, including in situations of intersecting vulnerabilities. And this is an obligation of states under international human rights law, and it's also a responsibility of businesses. Despite this, unsettling human rights violations and abuses have been reported by rights holders in the past in the context of biodiversity finance across different regions of the world. There have been reports of forced evictions of indigenous peoples from their lands. There have been reports of murder, rape, torture, and other cases of ill treatment in the context of conservation, cases of arbitrary detention, destruction of property, and others. And it is therefore essential to highlight explicitly in the resource mobilization strategy, which will be discussed very soon at the plenary taking place right now, that human rights apply in the context of biodiversity finance. As already pointed out by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in his open letter on human rights priorities for COP16, the resource mobilization strategy should call for states to align all biodiversity-related financial flows, international, domestic, public and private, including from international and regional financial institutions and development banks with human rights obligations. It is also important to call on businesses, on the private sector, to respect human rights in line with the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which is an authoritative framework that has been endorsed unanimously by the Human Rights Council. As the transformative change assessment adopted last year by the IBES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, found, quote, "Visions for living in harmony with nature are more likely to succeed when they emerge from inclusive, rights-based approaches," unquote. We therefore urge states to take this into account and build upon what has already been agreed in the GBF and reflect human rights, including gender equality, in the resource mobilization strategy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nella, from the UN High Commission, for accepting the invitation to be a speaker in the CBD Women's Caucus press conference. And now I will move forward to the attendees if you have any question to our esteemed speakers. Thank you so much. We have one question here. Yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Simon. I work for German Public Radio and TV, and also always struggling explaining to our audience things that are really far away from them. So you talked about those women being on the ground and being the ones that are leading biodiversity solutions. But I would like to ask you if you can give some example of people maybe from your country or people who you know, who are these women and how are they leading the solutions, so I can maybe more easily explain to our audience who are we talking about. And maybe a second question, if you can, on a point, because I didn't quite catch it, what your position is on like the main conflict we are seeing here around how to manage the resources for the biodiversity funding. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your question. Any of our speakers?
I will take the question gladly. I'm from Mexico, and as you know, Mexico has given the world more than 100 food products that have been in our tradition for centuries. Women in Mexico, indigenous women and local communities are in constant contact with these varieties of, for example, maize. Maize is the cereal, more sold cereal in the world. And the diversity that we have in Mexico from native maize, more than 64 different varieties that are adapted to different climates, to different heights, to different humidity situations, can provide what we call genetic resources for food and agriculture. This knowledge is the knowledge of women on the ground. How you use this maize for many things, not only for making tortillas, but for medicine, for different dishes, for adapting it to, for example, popcorn was invented in Mexico with a special kind of variety. And this diversity was even addressed yesterday in the opening event about the variety that we have in biodiversity and food. This is women on the ground conserving that diversity in genetic resources.
Thank you.
Because genetic resources are the seeds, okay?
Thank you.
Wait, and the second question,
we don't have time.
Yes, I know, but
Yes.
I have to answer.
Yes, please.
The second question would be, this is why women need the funding. Now, how it is managed, in which kind of mechanism, or we are really more interested in what elements, any kind of mechanism, even the GF has to have for these projects or strategies of women on the ground to be funded directly, not through intermediaries. So women are not part of the 50% of the beneficiaries are going to be women. Of what? We don't know. We are not represented. We are not taking part on decision making. So that is what we are calling for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edda, for sharing this example from Mexico. I will take one more question. Please, your name and which
Thank you.
group.
I am Carolina Toapanta from Bomaco Foundation in Ecuador. And nice to hear from you. And sorry I was late. I was on the plenary that do not end. So yeah, I understand what you were saying. We are working on the ground. I am trying to do some conservation of endangered species, especially of monkeys. There is one monkey that we're trying to conserve. There is only 250 individuals left in the world. And this, where we live, those are critical ecosystems, and it's so hard, even though it's so hard to get funded. For me to be here was very difficult. We are a little NGO. So my question is, how do you think is the better strategy to avoid intermediaries? Because that's the only way us women with little capacity of getting to these sources could get those sources. So how we can avoid that? Because that's the only way for us now to get those resources to try to prevent extinction of these species we are trying to work with. Thank you.
Anna from Argentina.
Yeah.
Please, thank you.
No, maybe quickly, what we were saying before is that we call on not only the existing financial mechanism for the CBD, but also other donors from states and from philanthropy, that they need to simplify the processes and to offer direct access to funds to women-led organizations. They need to simplify the application and reporting processes, support alliances with partners, which is something different to intermediaries, but with partners that are trusted by women's and IPLC groups. And so that whether it's a small, medium, or big grant, it can go directly to their needs, to what they're needing, not top-down canned solutions, but what they're already doing on the ground. And for instance, philanthropy can do something around that there is a movement, slowly but surely is advancing, or more trusted-based philanthropy. So I trust your work, I have visited you, I know what you're doing, so here's the unrestricted funding that you need, and I'm going to ask as little reporting as possible. So that they engage with the groups, the organizations, they get to know them so that they can direct these funds to the groups directly, to be quick. But also, I'm at the total disposal of the colleague that was asking about examples of solutions, because I could also give you plenty of different women's groups across Argentina resisting extractivism.
And now we will be here.
We will remain in contact.
We will be around for any questions from your side. We will be happy to answer these questions. I think that's our press conference for today is coming to the end. Our speakers still here for the upcoming days as well. We will be really happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much to all our esteemed speakers for their invaluable contribution. But before we wrap up, I encourage each one of you to consider becoming a gender and biodiversity champion, which is an initiative and a campaign that is led by the CBD Women's Caucus. This initiative calls on leaders from all sectors to be part of the implementation and to unite for gender plan of action, for the implementation of gender plan of action and the Convention on Biological Diversity. By signing up, you can join a global movement for dedicating and for more forging a more inclusive, equitable, and a sustainable future. Thank you so much. And also to the lady right there, if you would like to join the CBD Women's Caucus, many of our members are from the grassroots organizations, so we are here to bring their voices and also to bring them here. So please join us. We will be really happy to welcome you here. We are welcoming all the grassroots and women who are really doing incredible job on the ground. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for listening and for your question. Thank you so much.